The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is back to its old self. Joan McCarter is writing over at Daily Kos, a piece titled Big Business Pressures Biden to Cut Entitlement Programs. They've thrown in with the Freedom Caucus, the kind of pro-billionaire caucus. So, well, actually, the Freedom Caucus is, as far as I can tell, largely funded by right-wing billionaires. And their economic terrorism. Again, the Freedom Caucus is not about freedom. They're about having Republicans run the country so that right-wing billionaires can continue to pay less than 3% income taxes and have their companies, pollute all they want, basically. So, the chamber is doing what it always does. It looks out for rich people and big corporations and screw the small businesses. And it's the small businesses, make no mistake, who are being and will be hurt by this game. I'm looking for a word here, but I guess game is probably as good a word as I've got. That the Republicans are playing, this treacherous game of, saying that they're not going to raise the debt ceiling, they're not going to let the government pay the bills that it has already incurred. Donald Trump ran up $7.6 trillion of debt for the United States, and now it's time to pay some of it off, and the Republicans don't want Joe Biden to pay off the debt that Donald Trump ran up. It's just that simple. Joe Biden cut the budget deficit in more than in half in the first year that he was in office. But Donald Trump's budget deficits is a $7.6 trillion addition to the national debt. That's got to be paid, and Republicans do not want that bill paid. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce writes this letter to Joe Biden, to President Biden. He says, the president of the chamber writes, "I write today in response to the letter you received yesterday from Senator Bernie Sanders and 10 of his colleagues related to the debt limit and your authority under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. It is the chamber's view that attempting to invoke the so-called powers under the 14th Amendment would be as economically calamitous as a default triggered by a failure to lift the debt limit in a timely manner. The argument that the executive branch can simply issue new debt over and above the debt limit to ensure that the federal government has sufficient resources to meet its obligations is not supported by the text of the Constitution." Right. The 14th Amendment says the debt of the United States shall not be questioned, but in any case, and ignores the obvious negative economic consequences that would occur if the administration attempted to issue such debt. And those economic consequences are what? They go on to say, the Constitution is clear. The power to borrow money on the credit of the United States is given to Congress and not the executive. And Congress has already authorized these payments. I mean, this is me speaking now, not the chamber. They go on to say, the validity of such debt would be subject to litigation, and by Secretary Yellen's recent characterization of a future act as legally questionable. So in other words, the chamber is basically saying, if you don't go along with the Republicans and cut veterans' benefits, lay off 10,000 workers in the Social Security Administration, gut the Environmental Protection Agency, dial back on payments to women and with infant children, the WIC program, cut food stamps, reduce aid to education. If you don't do those things, if you don't abandon your attempt to give $10,000 in debt relief to students who are crushed by student debt. If you don't do those things, we're going to sue you. If you pay the bills, we're going to sue you. They go on to say, simply put, there is no alternative to reaching a bipartisan agreement to raise the statutory debt limit. Right. Here's what's particularly ironic about this, and then I'll pick up your calls. I'd love to get your thoughts on these and whatever else is on your mind as we're kind of rolling into summer here. In a very real way, and this, we haven't discussed this on this program in a couple of years, actually. I think it's been that long, and I used to write about this a lot. But in a very real way, many of these so-called welfare programs, food stamps, for example, low-income housing supports, are actually subsidies to business. Here's how it works. If you're running a business that is paying minimum wage or paying, relatively low wages, and, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, say you're paying $8, $9, $10 an hour, something like that. If you're running a fast food joint, if you're, Walmart, I think Walmart's up to $11 an hour now, but still, it's pretty low pay. If you're running that kind of business, the people who are working for you qualify for food stamps and housing support and Medicaid and medical support paid for by the government. So you as an employer don't have to pay a decent wage and you don't have to provide benefits because the federal government is doing it and the state governments as well. So these are actually not just ways of, protecting people who are at risk of, danger from extreme poverty. These are also ways of subsidizing business in America. And that's why I find it particularly bizarre that the Chamber of Commerce is saying, gut those programs, because it's going to hurt the companies the Chamber of Commerce represents.